welcome back to another episode of Sparking Change, a podcast for prevention. Today, our guest is Representative Didech, so we'd like to welcome you. We start off by asking all of our guests, what's your why? So what's your why is this Catalyst campaign of just like why they choose to stay substance free and why they choose to support this cause. So we would just like to ask you, what's your why?
Well, everything I do is a state representative. My focus is how can we make as many people's lives as better as we can as possible. And a recurring theme over the past 6.5 years that I've been doing this job has been substance abuse prevention. And there's a variety of things that we've been able to do that have been very successful. There's some things that we need to continue to do to make further progress on this issue. And I'm really looking forward to chatting with you and talking about the work that we've been doing on this.
Yeah, so I just want to start off by asking you some questions about yourself. So, first of all, what communities do you represent, and what also inspired you to become a state representative?
Yeah, so my district, I represent the 59th district in the state of Illinois. The way it works in the Illinois House of Representatives, there's 118 districts, and I represent District 59, which includes parts of Wheeling, Buffalo Grove, Lincolnshire, Vernon Hills, Mundelein, Libertyville, Green Oaks, Indian Creek, and parts of Park City and Waukegan as well. So it's kind of a long district. It starts in the north in Waukegan, goes all the way down to Wheeling. Um, I was inspired to run for state representative. I first got involved in this line of work. My first job as an attorney after I graduated from law school was on the Senate President's legal staff down in Springfield. And I was able to see really up close and personal how the work that is done in Springfield in the state capitol can have a real positive effect on people's lives. And when the opportunity came for me to run for office, I didn't want to let that pass up. So I ran for office. I was very fortunate to get the votes to win, and now I get to do cool things like talk on podcasts with you and figure out how we can make people's lives better.
Yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate the work that you do. Obviously, as a student from that district, we really appreciate the partnerships that you have with us and the support that you've shown. So I just want to ask, like, what are some specific actions that you've done or that you've been pushing for at a state level in regards to substance use prevention in adolescents?
Yeah, so a big one is a few years ago we passed the bill that we call Tobacco 21. It raised the age to purchase tobacco in Illinois from 18 to 21 years old. This had been a movement that had been making progress for a few years, and what we saw was uh, a growing number of local municipalities increasing the age from 18 to 21, and we ended up with somewhat of a patchwork of laws throughout the state of where you could be 18 to purchase tobacco, where you had to be 21. And from my perspective, and from a lot of my colleagues' perspectives, it was time to just raise that statewide from 18 to 21. That makes it a little bit harder for young people to get access to tobacco products. And what we've seen since then, I think, has been a very positive trend, positive meaning in a downward direction of youth use of tobacco products, which I think has been a very good thing.
Yeah, I think tobacco has definitely been a pretty prevalent issue, and increasing that age has definitely helped reduce those numbers, especially with like the teens that are like close to that age but not there yet. So I think that really has been helpful. So now I just want to ask you a question about synthetic cannabinoid derivatives such as Delta 8 THC and Delta 10 THC, and those remain unregulated. So what would you suggest in terms of certain restrictions that you could specifically implement to prevent the youth use?
That is probably the most significant problem that we are continuing trying to address, the proliferation of these synthetic cannabinoid products, which by really any measure, they have an intoxicating effect, right? They affect people's bodies sometimes very similarly to cannabis, sometimes in more extreme ways, which is all the more reason why they need to be regulated. My preference is they should be treated the same way as cannabis products. They should only be able to be sold in cannabis dispensaries. You have to show an ID that you're 21 years old before you can go in the door, subject to testing regulations, subject to labeling regulations, subject to advertising restrictions to make sure they're not marketed to children. To me, that's the best way to regulate these products in a way that's safe for the public.
Yeah, so you mentioned adding some of these regulations, but obviously that does come with challenges. So what would you say is like some of the bigger challenges that it comes to when you're trying to add these restrictions on different products?
So in on the Delta 8 question specifically, there are some legislators and I think stakeholders and they all come from a good place and these are good faith concerns that they want to make sure that businesses that have been following the law and have been playing by the rules are treated fairly. Um, right, not every business has the resources or the ability or can qualify for a cannabis license in Illinois. So I am sympathetic to the position that it's not fair for the state of Illinois to be shutting down businesses that have been following the rules. From my personal perspective, is we need to balance that with the public's interest in public health. And I come down on the side on we need to make sure the public is safe from these products that are very dangerous, and in particular that we're doing more to make sure that they're kept out of the hands of young people who really shouldn't be using them because they could have very significant long-term impacts on their health. So there's alternate perspectives on this issue, and people have different opinions, which, that's how the legislative process is supposed to work, right? We're in a democracy, and people have the right to different opinions. But for a variety of reasons, it hasn't been as simple to pass these laws as I would hope it would be.
Yeah, so as we're talking about passing like these different rules and regulations, one of the questions that we had for you is what do you think has been like the most effective at like controlling these numbers, especially in youth, but also in other age groups as well that are more susceptible to harm by these substances? So what do you think has been like the most effective laws passed?
Well, I think big picture, the shift that we have gone from essentially criminalizing drug use towards treating it as a public health challenge has been very positive. Right, you'll remember, or you won't remember, but some people will remember in the 80s and the 90s, the government pursued what it called the war on drugs. It was essentially a mass criminalization of drug possession and drug distribution uh, with good goals, right? They wanted to stop people from using harmful substances, but criminalizing everything didn't work. And in a lot of ways, it made the problem worse. People who were addicted were not able to get the help that they needed. And we created kind of a cycle of criminalization that was really, really hard for people to break out of. We've transitioned to approaching this issue in a way that I think makes a lot more sense, which is not to criminalize the people using this or the people selling this necessarily, but how do we regulate this in a way to keep as many people as safe as we can? And I think the systems that we're building in Illinois make a lot of sense, right? You look at cannabis in particular. You can't get rid of cannabis. We tried in the 80s, we tried in the 90s, it didn't work. So if you can't get rid of it, what's the next best option is to regulate it, make sure that it's labeled so everybody knows exactly what's in the products that they're using. Make sure that it's sold out of highly regulated dispensaries so young people can't purchase it. And we know the identity of every single person who comes in and out of that store and testing, making sure that there are not truly harmful substances that are put inside of these regulated cannabis products. I think it's broadly a system that works, and I think it's a system that is replicable to the Delta 8 problem that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, so now that we've talked about some of the ways that things have actually been some of the different laws that have been passed and some of the ways that have been effective at that control, we kind of want to transition into talking about how us as constituents can actually advocate for that. So, what do you think are some effective strategies that constituents can use when they're trying to advocate for substance regulation?
Well, if this is an issue that's important to you as an individual member of our community, reach out to your representative, reach out to your senator, reach out to your congressman. Believe it or not, we read our emails, we listen to our voice messages, we meet with as many constituents as we can. If you can put a group together of like-minded people, that's sometimes more time efficient to try to set up meetings. But we are always happy to hear from constituents about the issues important to you, and we always try to be as responsive as we can be as to how that informs the work that we're doing in the state capitol.
Yeah, and we also know that you've been working pretty closely with Catalyst over the past couple of years in order to bring up some of these regulations at the state level. So could you just tell us like a little bit about some of the work that you've been doing?
But Catalyst has been a really, really important partner on these efforts for a few reasons. One, and speaking personally, when I try to decide, what bills to support or what policy issues to prioritize, my perspective is that the things that the government does today are going to impact young people more than it impacts anybody else. So anytime a group of young people has an opinion about legislation or has thoughts about how what we're doing is going to impact their future, that's something that I put a lot of weight into. So I always love hearing from young people, hearing their perspectives, hearing what they think the government should be doing, and I try to be very responsive to that. Catalyst has also played a very valuable role advocating on specific pieces of legislation as well. Tobacco 21, which I mentioned, I know Catalyst played a role in advocating for that, and they continue to play a really important role raising awareness and informing legislators about the importance of the flavored vapes regulation as well as the Delta 8 regulation. So I really appreciate the work that they're doing.
Thank you so much. That was our questions for today, and we really appreciate your insight, especially from a legislative perspective. A lot of times we get to hear from a lot of different organizations, but it's really cool to see the other side of it where things are actually happening and where things are being passed. So we really appreciate you having you on today.
Thank you for having me. Hopefully we can do this again soon.
Yes, of course.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening, and make sure to follow us on Instagram at catalyst_SHS for more updates. Also, follow our podcast on Spotify at Sparking Change, a podcast for prevention, by clicking the links in our description for more information. Bye-bye!